it is my pleasure to welcome back up onto the stage Simone Douglas, and she has another incredible panel of experts to join with her. So please make Simone feel very welcome once again.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. Okay. So we've talked a bit about marketing, and marketing's very important, but something that's even more important than marketing is culture. So we all know that Ivan's very fond of saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm very fond of saying that you can't have culture without good leadership and without good followership. So today's panel is leadership, followership and culture. Where to from here? And again, we are very privileged to have some amazing panelists that have some great insights to offer. So I'm going to start by introducing them, and they're going to start wandering up to the stage, hopefully. So Ruth Sims. Ruth Sims is a PhD candidate at UniSA Business and believes that workplaces need good followers and good leaders. She communicates a research-based expert understanding of followership. This perspective complements and challenges the more usual focus on leaders and leadership. Thanks for joining us, Ruth. We also have Dr. Diane Calendra. Hopefully I can't quite see her in the background there, but we think she's floating around. She's the discipline leader and senior lecturer of the Australian Institute of Business in their marketing and entrepreneurship section. She has over 25 years of experience in developing and implementing strategies and marketing plans for multiple different products and services in business to consumer and business to business segments in multiple different industries, both nationally and internationally. Such brands as Bristol Myers Squibb, Folding Pharmaceuticals and Australia Post. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Diane. Okay, and we have the lovely Mr. Paul Priest, who is the South Australian Director for the CEO Institute, providing leadership development programs for CEOs, business owners and senior executives. Paul is a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, an experienced non-executive director and advisory board member, and has senior executive experience in international trade, manufacturing, retail, member organisations and higher education. He's been a trusted advisor across a diverse range of industry sectors for over a decade, and we are very lucky to have him here today. Thank you, Paul. And finally, Julian Coolman, executive coach of JK Leaders, is a widely respected executive coach, educator and facilitator. Julian brings more than 30 years of broad leadership expertise and creative thinking to everything she does. Having worked with senior managers and executives across Asia, Pacific and Europe with a reputation for honesty, integrity and innovation and commercial acumen, she often sits at the head of the table when organisations are planning their future strategies. Please join me in welcoming our panellists. Thanks, everybody. So I'm very excited to start this panel off talking to Ruth about followership. So followership is a concept that I hadn't really heard or explored until I was lucky enough to interview Ruth on my podcast some months ago. So I'm really excited to have you joining today. So Ruth, why do we need to take followership seriously, especially if we begin with a leadership focus?
We need to take followership seriously because leadership's only half the story. So we're confident that we know about leaders and leadership, what leaders do and what they bring to an organisation. And I'd certainly agree that all of that is really important. But what we know very little about is those people who are not at a point in time leading, they're following. Leaders don't lead without followers. But we know very, very little about what followership is, what effective followership is. And as soon as people who are in a follower relationship start behaving proactively, we call it leadership, and it's really not. It's something else, and we need to understand it better.
Yeah, absolutely, and I look forward to exploring that in a couple more questions later. Paul, have we made leadership too complicated these days?
Yes, we have. And that's not to say that business is simple. Business can be complicated and complex. But I think the notion of leadership, and this is someone, if you come to my study, I've got walls of books on leadership and I've done courses on it. I just think we're trying to put too much into people's heads. I think it's that analogy, if I threw 6 tennis balls at you, you can only catch one. And I think for leaders, we often, are being bombarded with all these ideas. Paul, you should be this, you should be that, you should be charismatic, you should be really doing this, you should be that. And I think there's some core principles about leadership that you just have to stick to. And for me, the starting point is self-awareness. Think about who you are. What do you want to be? Do you know enough about yourself? Because there's different types of leaders, and you need to find the one that's the right one for you and be really authentic about you and not try and be a copy of someone else. So I think there's some simple principles, and don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, nice. Julian, as a highly experienced executive and leadership coach, what has the coronavirus taught us about leadership, and where do we go from here?
Well, it certainly has been a bit of a roller coaster of change and uncertainty in the last 12 or so months. And the work that I've been doing with leaders has indicated that there's probably 2 areas of leadership capability that have come to the fore more than any other time. And one of those is around that engagement piece, which is always important for leaders to engage their people. But in this sense, it's more about, if we look at our business and where it's heading, what does that look like now? And the changes that might be before us that we don't even know about yet. If you look at where you thought your business would be this time last year, it's just so unknown. So the key for me, and what I'm working with in organisations, is those leaders engaging their people in that change management and allowing them to have some ideas of their own, to share those ideas, and also to be part of the decision making. I think if leaders can do that, then they're creating an environment where people can thrive and not be so fearful. And the other piece is around the well-being of you as a leader and your people. I can't believe the work that I'm doing now in that space. I'll give you an example of a manager that I'm working with at the moment. He's skilled, knowledgeanoble, committed to the company, has always had a very happy-go-lucky demeanour. And in the last 6 months, he's struggled to walk in the front door of the office. He's in tourism, and so the massive change that happens every hour almost has really got him down. And interestingly, his director came and asked him just recently how things are going. I'm noticing that you're not yourself in the office anymore. And his response to that surprised himself, because he would normally say, oh, it's okay, it's fine. He actually said, no, I'm not travelling very well. And there was a conversation then, thanks to the director for opening it up, around how we might support you and what strategies you might have to put in place to look after yourself. So they're probably the 2 major things.
Yeah, cool. Diane, how are our values changing, and what do these changes mean for leadership, followership and culture?
Thanks, Simone. Yeah, my research and work and interests really are a lot around values. And what I see and what I notice is happening is that is everyone familiar with the iceberg theories? The iceberg above the water. I take that as being, the manifestation of leadership and followership and culture, the behaviours and so on and so forth. But underneath and the water below sits organising principles. And those organising principles are around values. Now, what I notice is that value systems are changing, right? And therefore are having impact and implications for our leadership, for followership, and for culture. Some of you may be familiar with a framework that was originally developed by Abraham Maslow, a hierarchy of needs. So in its simplest form, basically it says that there is an order in which people's needs are met, and they actually mirror value systems. So for those of you not familiar with it, the basic level is survival, and then we move through to belongingness values, and then to esteem or achievement, and then ultimately to self-actualization. Now, what I notice is that, certainly in the West at least, we've moved up that pyramid, essentially, as a collective and individually. So, in the past, where it was all about safety, those needs have largely been met in the West. And same with belongingness. And for a long time, we've sat at this next level, really, which is around self-esteem and achievement. And so we've had, people going out there and doing it and making it happen and all of this kind of thing. But success isn't everything it's cracked up to be, right? And essentially what I notice is happening is that people are coming to those kinds of realizations, and that's on an individual level, and then collectively there's stuff that's happening as well in terms of it's actually produced a lot of crisis in the world, right? And now people are stepping back and going, oh, maybe we haven't got it quite right. And what I see is this massive shift, this movement from essentially those values really around me, either individually or collectively, to we. Which is an acknowledgement of our oneness, essentially, and our connection and interconnection with everyone and everything. And so what I notice in terms of leadership is that we are moving from that old-fashioned, or the older style of transactional leadership, as we call it, the rational model, reward and punishment, we've seen the transformational leadership theories in terms of charisma and all of that sort of thing, to models of leadership which are around servant leadership.
Yeah.
And the rise, as Ruth said, of followership, because in this model, really, you are actually needing to be both a leader and a follower simultaneously. Those old models of hierarchical, order in the absolute, power, etc., are fading away.
And I think
to make room for what it is we need to deal with, which is higher complexity than we've never faced before.
And I think that's really challenging as leaders, and even, every person that owns a business, we're a leader in and of ourselves. But that shift in landscape and the fact that the landscape is not solid. And so, those base needs of safety, knowing that you can feed your family, knowing that you can feed your staff members' families, that's not fixed in stone anymore. So it's quite confronting as a leader. And then you're expected to empower your teams. And so, Ruth, what's one of the things that as leaders we need to consider in order to allow us to be successful at empowering our followers to make us more successful?
I'd actually shift the question slightly, if I could.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a couple of really interesting things here. One is the death of the hero leader. We know, and I think we've known for some time, but we've kind of wanted to hang on to it. The world is too complicated, businesses are too complicated for a single individual who's very special to do very special things, often two less special people. That model, as you say, is dead. What that opens up then is a new way of thinking about leading. And part of that is, yes, to be very mindful and supportive and working with the people who work with and for you and your business. But it's also a slight shift in the way you're thinking about things. So like Darren had his shifts of perspective this morning, one of the shifts that I think we need to make if the hero leader is not useful anymore, we need to be thinking about engagement in a different way. So it's not so much about leaders engaging followers and doing that in that leader to follower push. It is about making space and followers having responsibility to step up and into that space. And that's a much more holistic way of working. The skills actually look very similar then between leaders and followers, and it's much, much more fluid. So individuals lead and follow at the same time, very often in a hierarchy, but we all lead and follow in different circumstances, often with the same people all the time. And so that fluidity and those skills that allow us to do both well, I think that might be where we're headed.
Yeah. Julian, what do you think some of those skills are that allow us to do those things well?
There's definitely an element of deep listening. There's the mindset is one of inclusiveness, but diverse thinking. And I think as the leader, if I talk about the leader rather than the follower, it's about how you engage those people. And for me, I talk about that being a curious space. So come from a curious space. Ask them powerful questions. What do you think about this idea? How do you think we can go about this? What's missing? How can I support you in that? So I think there's a lot to be said about the power in the question, and then the listening for the gaps, the things that are still missing, and asking deeper questions. My focus is on creating responsibility and accountability in the leaders, and so it's not about me giving them. So I'm really being the curious leader, curious coach. And it's not about me giving advice or consulting, it's about me being curious, because I know they have the answer. And leaders know that they've got good people working with them who have those great answers. And if we don't ask the right questions, we may miss that completely.
I think, Paul, you've been around for a little while. So what advice can you give to someone who maybe the model of leadership they experienced themselves before they went out into business was perhaps more direct, dictatorial, you're a unit of production, and now they're trying to transition into this kind of more fluid, experiential type process. Where do I start if the only leaders I've ever known are people who tell me what to do and I have to do it?
Thanks for reminding me about my age. I'm older than you think. Look, I still sort of go back to my simple mindset. I'm a pretty simple bloke. To be successful as a leader, I said earlier, don't try and model yourself on other people. So, you can learn of saying, I've worked for or reported to someone who I don't think is a particularly good leader. Therefore, I'm not going to model myself on that. You can look at other successful leaders and say, yeah, look, there's a little bit of them that I can learn from. What would they do in this situation? I might do the same. But if you're progressing in your business and you've got staff reporting to you or you're employing people, I always say surround yourself with really good people. I've been fascinated by, and maybe myself in my early executive career, of thinking, I better not employ this person because they might be smarter than me. I mean, I flipped it around 20 odd years ago to say, if I surround myself with really good people, life becomes fantastic. Yeah. Find the best possible people, whether that's within your organisation or externally, through BNI or other, business networking groups or executive groups. Surrounding yourself with good people continues to refresh you, but also it takes the load off you. And the other people then talking, the ideas that have already come up, getting people involved in the business so they feel empowered. Well, you do that by letting go. You don't have to be. And again, I think, in my early days, it was like everyone had to come to me for an answer. And, I thought I was bloody wonderful because, people would, hey, Paul, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? And you flip that around, that when people come to you now, you say, what do you recommend? What are you finding? I mean, the people that work with you are really bloody smart. They're doing things, they're seeing things that you can never see as a lone ranger. So, it's an interesting and I'm not sure that leadership really has changed that much. Go back to my comment about simplicity, and maybe we're overcooking it a bit, because I think successful leaders for a long time have empowered their people. I think they have, let go of saying, I need to know everything. I think those people failed decades ago. So I'd encourage all of you to say, well, how am I going to operate? Am I going to surround myself with fantastic people? Am I prepared to let go? And that doesn't mean you just say, hey, okay, everybody, go do as you like. You will, as Michael Gerber said, what's our purpose? What are our expectations for the business? What are we trying to achieve? And get unity around that, so you don't just have a whole lot of lone rangers running about the place. Yeah. And I think, all the evidence shows that successful leaders are good people. They're good with people. If you're not good with people, I think you're going to struggle to be a leader.
So we start there. Yeah, absolutely. I think, so we've talked a little bit about leadership, we've talked about followership, but we haven't talked a lot about culture. And so, realistically, culture will make or break your business. How do we, as business owners, start to create a high-performing culture, or a culture of excellence, or an invested culture? I mean, there are so many buzzwords you can use to describe it, but what we're really talking about is buy-in and people communicating the vision. What are the steps that we can take? What are the questions we should ask ourselves to start off with? And I'm going to throw it open to whoever wants to speak first now, rather than going backwards and forwards. So.
Well, I'll just pick up then on what Paul said and just take that a little bit further in terms of, I think this is what you're really saying, it's about being human.
Yeah.
And I think COVID has really shone a light on the fact that we need to connect back to the humanity of all of us, and remembering that as a core piece of leadership, and the importance of that, to connect with people in your team, to honour, value and respect them, and actually to see them. Because I think that the only thing that anyone really wants is to be seen.
Yeah, and heard.
At the deepest level. And if you can connect in with that, you can bring a team along with you on whatever journey that you want to take them.
Ruth, you look like you have something to add.
I think there's a couple of things. One thing that I think we need to remember in this space is that followers choose whether or not they follow. So a leader can be trying to do all of these things, but if they've not got the people in their team buying into that as well and working with them for organisational ends, it's like a conductor in front of an orchestra and nobody's playing. The conductor's just standing there waving their arms around. But if you've got people who are wanting to follow, then you've solved a lot of your issues, if you like, about culture, because you've got a group of people who are working to the same end. You've got people who are curious and having conversations about how to achieve this. And leaders are obviously very important in terms of communicating their goals for the business, what they want it to look like, how they want it to be. They select staff, just as staff select leaders to achieve that. But culture is also something that bubbles up. So it can't actually be imposed. No. And so if you've got all those things ticking, the culture is what the culture is. And it will be one that is doing the sorts of things that you're talking about if you've got those pieces in place.
Makes sense to me. Julian?
So, Ruth, I've got a question.
We're going off script here.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
You say that if you haven't got followers, that you need to get them into a following mode. How do you do that? How do you get them to be followers?
They have to want to choose to follow. So you do the sorts of things that Diane's just been talking about, and you do those very simple leadership things.
Yeah.
You know, you're a human being. That helps enormously.
Yeah.
What if you're a not nice human being? Let's be honest, we've all met that leader. You know, they might
Are they a
have all the
leader?
they've got the technical expertise. They've got things
Exactly.
that they're doing. They're ticking the boxes. They're leading by tick box, check
box.
box.
Yep.
So what do we do then, Julian?
Well, I have worked with leaders like that, and you know, there's no simple answer. It's more making it relevant for them, and allowing them to perhaps have some idea of how they may be being perceived by their team. And sometimes we can have conversations around that and develop strategies around how they can comfortably change or implement some different ways of behaving or communicating with those people, but really they're the role model. So, you know, the education piece around that coaching conversation is who are you being and how do you think you're being perceived? And if there's a gap there, how do we close that? What do you need to be doing? And, you know, there's no one size fits all here. It's different for every individual.
Yeah, and I think, Paul, I'll give you a case study to play with. Throw myself under a bus now, Tim, so it's okay. You know, I have 3 businesses now, and I've had social media had it for a long time when I acquired business number 2, and we had a pretty good culture, I thought. Done a lot of work on it, the team was invested in it, it was great. So I thought it was safe to take on another enterprise. So I vanished from my team to take on the second enterprise, and I stuck my head up for air 6 months later and worked out that I had broken the culture over here because I was fully invested in this culture right in front of me and what I was trying to do. What advice would you give to someone who has, like, just at that moment had the epiphany that they've broken their own culture, and where do they start?
If you've become aware of it, that's fantastic because that gets the first tick. Because a lot of people don't realise they've got themselves into that situation until they look behind and where is everyone? Or they're standing there but they're actually not doing anything. So in your case, I say, congratulations, you identified it. Then you say, well, what's gone missing? And is it actually possible for me to be the leader of all 3 units? So it will depend, lots of things, you know, you'll say it depends, but if you've got 3 businesses and they're all quite unique in your situation, are you really able to spread yourself properly across all 3? And if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do a lot of very clear delegation and say, okay, back to my point of letting go of saying, well, with some guidelines, the people that work in each of those units, we will agree on direction, we'll agree on targets. I'll still have, you know, a very much results-driven organisation. So what are those results that you want to achieve? Are they clearly articulated to the people? And, you know, and how are we going to get there? And it's, you know, it's quite liberating to say to the people, here's, you know, collectively what we're trying to do. How do you think we can get there? When you take that mindset that says, I'm prepared to let the people help me achieve what we're doing, it's really liberating. You know, I've said to you before, Simone, you know, one of the great things about being a leader or having your own business, you choose what you do all day. You know, if I'm a follower, I get told, and there's expectations of what I have to do all day. But if I'm running my own business or leading a business, if I want to read email all day, I can. Who's going to stop me? I can go to meetings all day. God, you know, don't do it, but lots of people do. You know, with no real clear purpose or outcome of what they're trying to do in those meetings, but it feels good. Or you might just go out networking all day.
Yeah.
So it's a really liberating role.
When you frame it that way, it absolutely is, yeah?
Yeah, you can... I said earlier, business is complex.
Yeah.
You know, it's not simple, but it is about the mindsets, you know, that you come to this with. If you say this is going to be bloody hard, and I'm going to, get myself tied up in all these things, and I'm going to try and do everything myself, and I'm going to read 5 new books on leadership next month.
Oh, Lordy.
You are filling your head up with a lot of stuff that's going to be hard to transfer into practical application.
And I'm going
And I'm dead keen on practical application and saying, get back to the simple bloke. I want to achieve things. I don't want to just get myself and my business tied up in knots.
Awesome. So I'm conscious that we're pretty much out of time. There you go. I've got applause. That'll be time. Thanks very much, guys, for joining us. Really appreciate we have some gifts for you on the way off the stage. I'm going to hand back over to our lovely MC. Thanks again. Cheers.